Welcome back to my channel, or to my channel if you are new here. My name is Haley. I make videos about books. I talk about books. I love books. And today we're talking about the books that I read in May. It is not as many as I typically read, but I still feel pretty confident. I walked out with a 5-star and I love that for me. Maybe 2 5 stars. I'm on the fence. So as always, let's just get into it and I will catch you back here at the end. The Vanishing Stair is the second book in the Truly Devious series. This is a YA mystery series and we're following our main character Stevie, who is basically this teenage detective, and she ends up being sent to this school that caters to the students and their future careers, what they want to do. For instance, one of her friends was a best-selling author at the age of like 13, and so he gets sent here, and it's basically college for these teenagers. It's so that they get a start in their careers, whatever it may be. And so the school has a mystery surrounding it that was unsolved, and she is on the case to solve this mystery. It is just a fun time watching her try to solve this, and it's chaotic, and there is students who end up getting murdered and killed, and it is just a really fun time. This book series is really fast-paced, which is something that I really love about it, because when I want kind of a fast-paced, ridiculous mystery, I know I can turn to this series and it will do that for me every single time. With that being said, this is only the second book that I've read of the series, but both times I just flew through the books because they were just so fun and exactly what I wanted at the time of reading them. And this was no different. I think the first one is still my favorite in the series, and this one kind of went a little downhill, but overall I have hope that the series will continue to be good and I will be continuing it. If you've watched my previous wrap-ups from the past 2 months, then you should have already predicted this. You should have seen it coming. This is Finlay Donovan Jumps the Gun. This is the third book in the Finlay Donovan series. This book follows Finlay and Vera as they end up at a police training academy. They're also trying to dig up dirt on these cops to figure out who is responsible for trying to murder Finlay's ex-husband. They end up doing some really ridiculous things in this book, as that is kind of a theme in this series, and I just loved it. You also get introduced to new characters, and some of the old characters aren't as prevalent in this book. And then you're also getting some romance for both of these characters actually in this book. So Finlay's love interests stay from the previous books, but then we have Vera, who's kind of in like a love triangle type of situation. Not really, because she's not really interested in either of the guys, but you do get Vera kind of having love interest, which is really fun to see. This is definitely my favorite book of the entire series so far, and I am so glad to be able to say that, honestly, because I thought that this was going to go downhill after not really enjoying book 2 as much. So the fact that I enjoyed this more than both of the other books in the series, I feel like it's really good. Beastly Bones is the second book in the Jacoby series. This is a YA fantasy mystery series. We're following Jacoby, who is a detective who specializes in fantastical detective cases. And then the story is told through our main character Abigail Rook, who is this apprentice to Jacoby, and at first she is very weary about what he does, and then as the series continues you see Abigail really lean into the way that Jacoby runs his business and the cases that he is solving, and it's just a really fun series altogether. But this book really fell flat for me, and I'm nervous because I have the third one on my physical TBR, but if I don't end up liking that, I'm probably not going to continue in this series. From the first book to this book, I just feel like there was something that happened, at least with myself, where I'm just not really caring about it as much, and I am a little nervous about that. To be fair, I did read Jacoby in like 2021, so I have obviously grown as a person. If I don't end up liking this series, then it is what it is. It's not that big of a deal to me, but I would like to like the series, you know what I mean? So just this book fell flat and it is what it is, but we will see about the third one. The Maidens is a dark academia mystery. We're following our main character Her name is Mariana, and she is this group therapist, and everyone in her family has died. She really doesn't even have anyone besides her niece. And one day her niece calls her and she's like, my best friend, I think that she was murdered. They found this girl and I think it was her. And lo and behold, it was her. And so Mariana goes to first comfort her niece, and then secondly to uncover what's happening in this mystery and who is responsible for it. She's dead set on this one guy who's a professor at this school the entirety of the book, and almost to the point where she's harassing him. It was just so ridiculous, and definitely my final straw with this author. I don't think I'll pick up another one of his books. They're just not for me. But overall, this was just a waste of time and not something that I really cared to talk about ever again. Let's talk about Finlay Donovan Rolls the Dice. I know you just saw me talk about Finlay Donovan Jumps the Gun. I can't get enough of the series. I do think that this is my second to least favorite book in the series. I had really high hopes for this book because I thought that it was just going to be ridiculous and fun and just wacky, and it just really didn't hold up to what I thought it was going to be. But overall, it was a fun time. So basically our main character Finlay ends up going to Atlantic City with her roommate and nanny and accountant named Vera, who is a very prominent character in the series. Vera does get her romance in this finally, and I really love that for her. I think that something that was missing from this is Vera for a chunk of it. She's not really in the picture, and that kind of dragged a little bit for me. That little section of the book. Also, this book has all our main characters that we know and love from the series ending up in Atlantic City at some point, and it was so ridiculous, but I loved it so much. We're not really introduced to too many characters in this book, so there wasn't really a lot to keep up with as far as new characters, and this book really just plot-wise was not something that I absolutely loved or enjoyed, but I did have a good time with it still, and it still remains a fun series. I have one more book left in the series, and I think I'm gonna hold off on reading it because as much as I want to jump into it after the ending of this book, I just need to take some time away from Finlay and her universe. But I am still really in love with the series, and I could see myself reading 20 books in this series because they're just so fun. They're so fast-paced. They're such a just silly, goofy time, and I love them, and that has not changed from the first book. Spells for Forgetting is following our two main characters, August and Emery, and August in the past has been accused of a murder, and so he goes away from this island, and then years later he returns to spread his mother's ashes. That was her last wish, and so he has to go back to this island. At this island you meet Emery, who was a childhood friend of August's, and she's also the best friend of the girl who was murdered. You see their relationship as it flourishes throughout this book, and you're also seeing the townspeople and their points of view, and that was probably the most interesting part to me, was what was happening with this town. I didn't really care as far as like the relationship goes between Emery and August. I didn't really care about anything other than this mystery and what actually happened to their friend. With that being said, what actually happened to their friend, the mystery just was not good enough for me, and that's the unfortunate part. If you were to ask me to pitch Spells for Forgetting, I would say it is similar to Midnight is the Darkest Hour by Ashley Winstead with a touch of magic. And that's pretty much it. That's what this book is. I will say though that this book was super slow moving, and although I felt similarly to The Unmaking of June Farrow, that book held my attention a lot more than this one did. I just was not interested in the plot and what was happening and where the story was going. I would say I got interested around like the 40 or so mark, and I stayed interested until about the 60% mark. Everything else was just okay, and I was just reading it to be reading it. The Maid was such a pleasant surprise. I was really nervous when I picked up this book because I thought that it wasn't going to be what I wanted it to be. Thankfully it was. I had such a fun time with this. This is such a fast-paced book. And although it's a mystery, there's still just an element of following this character and her life and the mundane task of it. And I really love that. I completely understand why people love it and it gets the praise that it does. This book was super big when it first came out and I still feel like a lot of people talk about it, and it came out in 2022. So in this book we're following our main character Molly, and she works at this luxury hotel as a maid, and she is really good at her job. She is down to the detail. She pays attention to everything. And then one day she ends up finding one of the hotel's prestigious clients dead in his bed, and she is now trying to figure out what happened to him while also being a suspect in this case. And it is just a fun time. It's definitely not the type of mystery that you pick up if you're looking for a book that's solely the mystery. This has a little bit more of an element to it. If you were to want to get into mystery and you read primarily literary fiction, I think that this would be a good starting point because there is still that literary fiction element while still having the mystery. Let's talk about the rom-commers because this book was fun. I had a good time with it. I also was not a big fan of it. This book took me forever to read. Granted, I read it during a time where I was kind of busy doing a lot. I was rearranging my room, as you can tell by that in the background. But I wish that it would have held my attention more, and it didn't. This is the first romance that I've read by this author, and I want to pick up another one of her romances, but I also don't really know how I'm going to feel about them. I really love the writing. I think that among the romance authors, this is definitely better writing that I have read, and for that I'm really grateful. This book follows our two main characters, Emma and Charlie, and Charlie is an established screenwriter. He has been doing this for years, and Emma has somehow worked her way into being a screenwriter and helping him with a rom-com that he has written that is absolutely terrible. And so their literary agent teams them up because he's read Charlie's script, it's terrible, and he's like, I know who can fix this. It's Emma. And so Emma goes to help him, and it is chaos. She's with him for 6 weeks and he doesn't really believe in love, and she's obviously the optimistic. She believes in love. She's written rom-com after rom-com, and so she's really here for this script. She wants it to happen, whereas he doesn't really care. He just wants this to be wrote so that he can get another movie going and directing that one. But in order to do that, he has to write this rom-com, and it is really just about their relationship. It's very slow burn. There is not a ton happening besides them just being together and trying to write this script. And I found that the most interesting part about this whole book, because despite having side characters, it's really just them two the majority of the book, and their relationship developing over these 6 weeks. And I really enjoyed that part because it felt very like on their relationship. There wasn't much going on outside of that, and that was really important to the book. Otherwise, I didn't care. And with that being said, that's the rom-commers. When I tell you that this was the standout of the month, are you going to believe me? Because I would hope so. Because this book was so good. My floor's creaking. This book was so good. It is the perfect literary fiction. When I pick up literary fiction, this is what I'm looking for, is something along these lines. You're following our main character Lila and her 5 friends who have basically been her rock. She doesn't really have any family after running away from home and going to Istanbul to live, and she works as a sex worker, and she's kind of just lost her family. So she has her 5 friends who are her ride or dies. They're there for her through thick and thin. And you really see that in the book, but you also see it in the way that she talks about them. So it's broken up into parts, and the first part is Lila's 10 minutes and 38 seconds as she is dying. She's recounting her life, the events of her life that's played like the major parts in it. They're like the highlights, if you will. And then in the rest of the parts, you are following primarily her friends as they are struggling to get her from the cemetery of Companionless, I believe is what it's called, which is an actual cemetery in Istanbul where people who don't have family members or who aren't claimed by anyone end up going. So she ends up going there, and they end up breaking her out of that cemetery and giving her the proper burial that she deserved. It's just a very deeply passionate and emotional story, and just really beautiful. A Harvest of Hearts centers around this fantasy world where sorcerers consume hearts for their magic. They don't take the whole heart, they just take a part of it. But the thing is that the villagers that have seen the people whose hearts have been taken have noticed a difference in the way that they act and their personality. And so they all kind of assume the worst about these sorcerers and what's happening, which rightfully so. So our main character, Foss, one day she encounters this sorcerer who is the only male sorcerer. So she encounters him and she believes that he's taken a part of her heart. And so she goes on a quest to find him, and in the midst of doing so, she ends up becoming his cleaner. And it is kind of just a story that spirals from there. She realizes who the bad guys really are, and she ends up enjoying his company and who he is, and it's a romance between them, and also it's just like a good little fantasy, you know. This book is compared to Howl's Moving Castle and The House in the Cerulean Sea. The House in the Cerulean Sea I don't see at all. Like, I genuinely still cannot find the comparison, but Howl's Moving Castle I can completely see. It's very similar in vibes and the setup of it with Foss and our Sylvester. Yeah, that's the male main character, and so it makes sense that it's compared to that. You also have like a talking cat, and it's a fun time. I don't think, and I'm not the best person to come to when it comes to fantasy, but I don't think that this was a good fantasy. For one, I didn't really like Foss as a character. I think that she was just annoying. I just did not care. And the romance was not that great either. And for being this big of a book, I would figure that there would be more romance and also just more of the world. It just didn't feel complete. And maybe that's because it's a standalone, maybe that's because I don't read a lot of fantasy, but I still enjoyed this, just not as much as I was expecting to. The villa follows our main character, Emily, and she goes to this villa with her best friend, and they are writers, and the whole idea is to go to this writing retreat to get away. And at this villa in the 1970s, a guy was murdered. There's definitely like a cloud of mystery around this murder and the people who took place in it. And so you're getting chapters in diary form of a character that was a part of the 1970s murder named Emily. And she was a writer, and she's talking about writing, and she's talking about being at this villa, and she's talking about romance, and it is kind of chaotic. There is so much going on in this book for how small it is, and I just feel like the mystery part of it was not fleshed out enough for me to really care. The ending of this also felt kind of rushed, not in the sense of like, oh, we gotta wrap everything up fast, but I feel like we never got a conclusive ending, if that makes sense. It just didn't feel right. I don't know how else to describe it. This book just as a whole just did not do it for me and was not something that I particularly cared for. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you did not, that is very much understandable. And I will catch you next Monday because I don't know what I'm doing, but we'll do something. And yeah, I'll see you later.